I used to be a janitor at Maplewood High, a small-town school that looked normal during the day, but once the sun went down, that building turned into something else. Most nights were silent, peaceful even. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a heavy blanket. But there was one night, the night the bell rang after midnight. I'll never forget it. The school was built in the 1960s, all pale green hallways and flickering fluorescent lights. The walls were cracked, the paint was peeling, and that smell of chalk and mold hung in the air no matter how much bleach we used. It was my job to clean classrooms, check doors, and lock up before heading home around 2 in the morning. The paycheck wasn't great, but the job was quiet, at least, it used to be. That night started like every other. I clocked in at 10 p.m., grabbed my mop bucket, and began my rounds on the first floor. The echo of my footsteps bounced through the hallways. Every sound, the squeak of my shoes, the creak of a locker door, seemed to echo twice as loud after dark. By 11:30, I was almost done with the east wing when I heard it. A sound from upstairs. A long, scraping noise, metal against tile. Like someone dragging a heavy desk. I froze. The second floor had been closed off all week because of repairs. I had locked those doors myself. I waited, thinking maybe it was a loose window or an old pipe shifting. But then it came again, scrape, scrape, followed by a soft, muffled laugh. A child's laugh. I remember whispering to myself, "There's no one up there." But my body didn't believe it. I grabbed my flashlight and started up the stairs. The air felt colder with each step. At the top, the hallway lights were flickering, dim, yellow, and unsteady. The classroom doors were all shut, except one. Room 204, the old science lab. The door was slightly open, swinging just enough to tap the frame every few seconds. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling in my hand. The moment I pushed it open, I stopped breathing. Every desk inside had been turned around, all of them facing the back of the classroom instead of the blackboard. The air smelled like dust and old chemicals. My light swept across the room, catching something white on the board. Written in fresh chalk were the words, "Sit down. The class isn't over." I felt a drop of sweat roll down my back. Someone had been here. Recently. I pulled my radio from my belt and pressed the button. "Mark, you up there?" I whispered. Static. "Mark, come in." Nothing but static crackling, and then a faint voice came through. "Attendance check." I froze. The voice wasn't Mark's. It was softer, slower, like a child reading from a list. I spun around and looked down the hall, empty. Every shadow seemed alive. The air felt heavy, almost electric. The radio hissed again. "Attendance check," it repeated, clearer this time, right before cutting off with a sharp pop. I wanted to leave right then. My instincts were screaming at me to run. But my curiosity, or stupidity, made me step farther into the classroom. The desks were all marked with names carved into the wood: Amy, Lucas, Daniel. Names I didn't recognize. And then I saw the class photo on the wall, framed in dust and cracked glass. It was a group of smiling students, black and white, standing in front of the same classroom. The date at the bottom said 1978. My flashlight flickered. I hit it against my palm. When the light came back, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. One of the desks at the back of the room had a chair pulled out. Like someone had just stood up. I took one slow step backward, then another. The wooden floor creaked under my shoe, loud in the silence. That's when I heard the bell. Ding! 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 It was faint, echoing from somewhere deep in the building. But it was unmistakable, the school bell. The one that was wired to the main power, which shut off at 10 p.m. It was impossible. The sound grew louder, sharper, until it seemed to be ringing from inside the room. I covered my ears, backing toward the door. Then, suddenly, the ringing stopped. Silence. Thick. Suffocating. I turned to leave, and froze again. There were faint outlines in the room now. Human shapes sitting at the desks, motionless, pale, transparent. Dozens of them. Students, all facing forward, like class had just started. Their faces were blank, hollow, eyes staring straight ahead. And behind the teacher's desk, a figure stood. A woman in a torn, soot-stained dress, hair hanging over her face. She raised her head slowly. The right side of her face looked melted, skin fused, jaw twisted. And she spoke in a dry, whispering voice that scraped the air. "You're late for class." My flashlight flickered once, and went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Darkness swallowed everything. For a moment, I couldn't even hear my own breathing, just that high ringing in my ears from the bell. Then, faintly, I heard the sound of chairs scraping against the floor. 1, 2, 3. Dozens of them, moving all at once. I flicked my flashlight, desperate to see. Nothing. I shook it harder, the light burst back for a second, weak and trembling, and what I saw made my blood freeze. The desks were empty. Every single one. But footprints had appeared in the dust. Small, bare footprints, leading straight toward me. My throat went dry. I took a step back, and something cold brushed against my arm. I turned sharply, shining the light into the darkness. There was no one there. But the smell of smoke filled the air, thick, old, like burnt wood. Then I heard whispering. Dozens of overlapping voices, all around me. Children's voices. Repeating the same words again and again, present, present, present. I ran. Out of the classroom, down the hallway, shoes echoing against the tile. My radio crackled to life again, louder this time. A woman's voice whispered through it, almost gentle. "Don't run in the hallways." The temperature dropped so suddenly that I could see my breath. My flashlight dimmed again. As I turned a corner, every locker door along the hall slammed open at once, bang. 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 One after another like gunshots. I screamed, stumbled, and fell hard onto the floor. My flashlight rolled away, spinning, its beam landed on a figure at the far end of the hall. A girl, maybe 12 years old. Her uniform was torn and gray with ash. Her hair hung over her face, and in her hand, she held a cracked school bell. She raised it slowly, and it rang once. Ding! The sound echoed deep into my bones. When I blinked, she was gone, vanished into the dark. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted toward the stairwell. But when I reached the door, it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Behind me, footsteps began to echo again, slow, synchronized, like a class walking in line. The whispering grew louder, closer, overlapping. Present, present, present. I slammed my shoulder against the stairwell door until it cracked open just enough for me to squeeze through. I stumbled down, 2 steps at a time, and burst onto the first floor. The lights downstairs were flickering violently now. Every bulb buzzed and flashed, painting the hallway in bursts of white and shadow. And in each flash, I could see them, shapes standing in the dark. Children. Dozens of them. Watching me. Their eyes glowed faintly, like embers. And at the end of the hallway stood the teacher, her face half melted, her dress charred black. She lifted a piece of chalk and began writing on the wall itself. Class dismissed. The chalk shattered halfway through the word. She turned her head toward me and smiled, skin stretching like paper. The overhead lights exploded. And then, silence. When I woke up, it was morning. I was lying outside the school entrance, my clothes soaked in dew, ears ringing. The police and the principal were there, along with paramedics. They said I must have passed out during my shift, carbon monoxide leak, maybe. But the strange part was, the building's power had been off since 9 p.m. the previous night. They found my mop bucket overturned on the second floor, near room 204, even though that entire hallway was supposed to be sealed for renovation. The principal looked pale when I mentioned the chalk writing. He didn't say much, just stared at me for a long time and finally whispered. That classroom burned down in 1978. Gas leak. They said it happened right before midnight. The teacher tried to ring the bell to warn everyone, but he stopped. I didn't ask him to finish. That day, I quit my job. But sometimes, when I drive past Maplewood High at night, I still see a faint light on the second floor. And if you roll down your window and listen closely, you can hear it. That single, lonely bell. Ringing softly in the dark. Ding! 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 They say the last class never ended. Maybe they're still waiting for attendance to be called. Maybe they're still trapped in that moment, their final lesson frozen in time. All I know is, when that bell rings after midnight, someone's still inside.